Welcome to the Holbrook Traveling Owls webinar. My name is Shannon Burnett, and I'm the Assistant Director with Alumni Programs in charge of the Traveling Owls portfolio. I'll be here to answer any Rice or Traveling Owls specific questions, but my hope is that you guys take advantage of your time with Kevin and Holbrook. So before I turn it over to him, I did want to provide some friendly Zoom reminders. So we're using the Zoom meeting format. So if you feel comfortable, we'd love to have you turn your video on, but that's not a requirement. We do ask that you keep your audio on mute unless you are speaking to cut down any background noises. Kevin will give an overview of the program and the 2021 trip to Panama, and then answer some questions at the end. If you have any questions that pop up in the meantime, you're welcome to put them in the chat, and I'll kind of keep an eye on that. Once the presentation is done, we'll look to the chat for some questions, but you're also welcome to take yourself off of mute and just ask them in more of a dialogue form. During the presentation, it might be helpful to put your view in speaker or side-by-side view so that you can see Kevin and his slides. And now I'd like to introduce Kevin Van Deen from Holbrook. And fun fact, his brother is a Rice alum from Sid Rich. So take it away, Kevin.
Thank you. Yeah, I've actually been to the Rice campus many times. This would have been back in the 90s, actually late 80s, early 90s. My brother was there, and so I've been to the Rice campus many times, and been to Houston many times, and have a neat connection there. And I just texted him to find out what house he was associated with, and he was all excited that I was doing a presentation for y'all. So that's a little bit of my Rice connection. And then a quick background on me is that I'm actually a biologist. I'm not I have not been in the travel industry very long, although I've traveled a lot and really enjoy it. But my background is really in biology and in kind of biology education. I worked at the Florida Aquarium in Tampa for 12 years before I moved over here to Holbrook. And my specialty was really in educating people about science, biology, conservation, nature, wildlife, and I do have a lot of experience with public speaking and doing presentations, but I was telling Shannon that this is actually my very first kind of virtual presentation, Zoom situation, so you probably won't get that impression today because it's a little awkward for me and I'm a little nervous about it. But that's kind of my history. And then I joined the Holbrook travel team in October because I was thinking I really love showing people natural ecosystems and wildlife and how great it would be to be in a situation where I could travel and expose people to these concepts all around the world. And so I got hired in October. I actually, the company, and I'll get to this in a second, is in Florida, but I'm in Seattle, Washington right now. And I worked from home anyway, even before the pandemic started. And yeah, I thought I'd be traveling a lot more than I currently am. So it seemed like a really great move at the time, and I'm hoping it still is once everything dies down. But let me move on to a little bit about Holbrook Travel, because I know that the alumni travel programs, and we work with quite a few of them, and they work with a lot of other companies, and I don't think Holbrook Travel is on everybody's radar. We're not a new company, so I don't want to make it sound like that, but we are a small company. We are a family started and family run still business. But the company actually started in 1974. So we've been around a long time. And we also have a really long history of doing programs specifically for universities, whether it's for professors or for students or for adult learning groups. And that's how the company started. Giovanna Holbrook was in Gainesville with her husband Juan, and they just started organizing trips for the University of Florida professors and their students to kind of actually go to the places that they were studying. And they started out going to Costa Rica and Galapagos, and they were kind of going there at times when it really wasn't that popular in the tourism market yet. So that's kind of how Holbrook got its start, and it grew from there. And it's still a family-run business. Andrea Holbrook is now the president. She's the daughter of Giovanna, who founded the company. And there's a little kind of group picture at the bottom. I'm not in there yet because that photo was taken before I joined the team. And then just a little bit about us too. We don't go everywhere. So we focus a lot of our attention on kind of wildlife and natural history destinations, although we do include cultural experiences and other things in our programs, but that kind of determines the countries we go to and the parts of the countries we go to. So when you look at the map of where we organize trips, it's mostly Central and South America, some African countries, a little bit of Asia, Australia, Antarctica. We don't do a lot in Europe, as you can see, or North America, although because of the pandemic, we are now going to try to offer some more North American US-based destinations. And then, so these are things, and I'm sure every company, you know, will tell you this, that these are the things that make their company great. So I'm not going to read through or expound on a whole bunch of them, but we do have really great connections and relationships that we've maintained over the decades in each country with all of our different field partners. And I think that's what makes the Holbrook experiences really special, is being able to rely on those relationships we've formed and built. And this I do like, because I think this really leads into our Panama trip nicely, because we spend so much time in kind of in natural history destinations and explaining and teaching people about ecosystems and wildlife. We do try to promote sustainability as much as possible and travel as sustainably as possible. And these are kind of the 4 pillars of sustainable travel: environment, community, culture, and wildlife. The reason I like this as it relates to our Panama trip is because the Panama trip is really a perfect blend of those things. It really combines some conservation and wildlife experiences. It combines community, global community, really, when we talk about the canal, and then some really great cultural experiences with you know, what it is actually like to live in Panama, whether it's from an indigenous culture or the current communities. There we go. And I will say too, you know, the current dates for the trip is February 10th through 17, which at the time when we were putting this together sounded great. I am in the process of trying to get it moved to November. So if anybody who's looking at this and really thinking about joining the Panama trip, we're looking at November, probably around the same dates, like kind of mid-November of 2021. And that should give us more time, because then the final payments wouldn't really be due until about a year from now. So it gives like kind of a good year till August 2021 to really put good money down on it. So I broke this up. So I didn't go day by day, and I'm sure a lot of people, when they do these presentations, go day by day, here's what we're doing. But because this particular program had those 3 core elements, the canal, conservation, and culture, which I think ties into Holbrook's reason for being, I decided to kind of break it up that way and just kind of talk about those different topics and how they are experienced on our Panama trip. So I'll go into that, those specific elements. And then if you have questions about specific days and things like that, we can talk about it. And I know that at least one person in the room has been to Panama and done a similar trip, and maybe some of you have as well. But as a biologist myself, Panama is fascinating to me because of that. It's got rainforest, it's got 2 coasts, not many places can boast that, the Caribbean coast, the Pacific coast, mountains and rainforest in between, the canal, which, you know, could potentially be connecting to waterways, but luckily because of the lock systems isn't. So it's just a really interesting place and a biodiversity hotspot for wildlife. And then for those people, and I know Rice is a big engineering school, that's where my brother studied. He was chemical engineering though. But I know the canal itself is also a source of fascination for a lot of people. And again, so just keep in mind that some of this information is pre-COVID-19 pandemic. So one of the reasons we promote going to Panama is because it's It's typically listed as an advisory level 1, for example, by the US State Department. And it's very easy to get to, especially from Texas. It's a short trip to Panama City. English is widely spoken. You can use US dollars there, so it's fairly easy and not a stressful place to go to. So here's our program at a glance. And just to give you an idea, if you look at the map, I mean, we're really only seeing a very small portion of the country. All of our activities are really centered around that canal, which is going right through the middle. It runs kind of north to south. And if you look at the itinerary, we've got 3 nights in Panama City, which is down on the Pacific side, 2 nights up in Colón, which is up on the Caribbean side, and then 2 nights in Gamboa, which is right in the center, and that's going to be the kind of the rainforest part of the experience. And you can see the price out there, $3,645 per person. And we really do small group sizes, and I've been noticing a lot of companies are really promoting right now their small group sizes because of COVID-19 and the pandemic, and we're hoping people will be more comfortable traveling in smaller groups. And Holbrook that was already the way we operated. We don't do big group trips because we're typically we're taking people bird watching, we're taking people to see wildlife and things like that. So we typically are already doing smaller groups. So we're looking at probably 10 to 16 people for this one. So let me just talk about those 3 kind of core components of this trip. And one of them is the Panama Canal. I think a lot of people, when they go to Panama, that's what they're really wanting to see, or that they're really curious about. And I'm not a fan of just reading off of my slides, so those are up there if you want some facts and figures and things like that. But it's been around since 1914, and it really did change the global economy by bringing 2 bodies of water together. So that's interesting to people. What's interesting to me is just the mechanics of it all, because like I said, from a biology standpoint, when you have 2 bodies of water that are separated like that, you don't want things. We already have a problem with invasive species and things like that. You don't want things from the Pacific and the Caribbean and vice versa. They've been separated for about 3 million years since that isthmus was formed. So this is a man-made component to facilitate global commerce, but at the same time, we want to keep those waters separate. So that's the fascinating thing about the Panama Canal, is how does that happen? And for anybody that's been there or that is familiar with locks, that's how it works. It's kind of mechanically separating that water. And the neat thing about this trip is that you get to visit a lock center on the Pacific side, which is the Miraflores Lock Center, which is what's in the photo there. And then you also get to visit a newer one, which actually just opened in 2016, over on the Caribbean side of the Panama Canal. As you can imagine, global commerce has changed a lot since the early 1900s. So the canal is always kind of changing and being upgraded and improved, so that if you haven't been there recently, that 2016 one is fairly new, and they have, you can see kind of how they did it originally, and you can see newer versions of locks that are now in place to allow more traffic in and out. We also have a lecture scheduled all about the past, present, and future of the Panama Canal. And we're going to do a partial transit. So I know, to me, when I hear partial transit, it sounds disappointing. It sounds like, why not do the whole thing? But it's a long process. It's 8 to 10 hours to go all the way from one side of the Panama Canal to the other. And what we do is we get in the Panama Canal from the Pacific side, and we head north, and we go through 2 of the 3 lock systems. So not only do you get to spend some time seeing the locks from the visitor centers and getting to see boats go through and see how it works, but you also get to be on a boat going through those lock systems. And they're kind of like sightseeing boats that you go to see that with. And we go through 2 of the 3 locks, and we go into Lake Gatun, which is what you see in the picture there on the upper right. So when I think of a canal, I just kind of think of a straight shot, but the Panama Canal opens up in the kind of the middle of the country into this huge lake, and then the canal kind of picks up on the other side of the lake. So what we do is we take the partial transit, up to the lake. We get off there. So it's kind of a half-day experience. And from what we've heard from a lot of people, that's enough, because once you've gone through the locks a couple times and you've been on the boat for kind of half a day enjoying that experience, it's not always necessary to continue and go all the way through, unless you're on a multi-night, cruise or something like that, and you're going from one side to the other. So it's a really satisfying experience, even though it's partial transit. Maybe we just need a better word for that, so it doesn't sound so like we're leaving something out. But it's going to be a really great experience. As far as conservation goes, so remember the title of the trip is Canal, Conservation and Culture. This is the part that gets me excited as a biologist, is just learning about the wildlife that's there and why this area, why this country is so unique in its biodiversity. And they have a whole museum devoted to that. So I'm excited about seeing that. If you look at it, it does not look like a typical natural history museum. This was designed by Frank Gehry. So it's very, very colorful, very modern, but it does talk about and has displays about Panama's wildlife, Panama's biodiversity, how it's been impacted or not impacted by the creation of the canal. So that sounds really exciting to me. That's in Panama City. And then you're going to spend several days in the Gamboa Rainforest Resort, which looks like a really beautiful, really peaceful setting. This is actually at the end of the trip. So great way to kind of wind down. If you remember from the map, Gamboa was kind of in the middle of the country, about halfway through the canal process. So we end the trip there before leaving out of Panama City. And this is where you'll get to explore the rainforest and the wildlife and the kind of conservation side of Panama. And if you're interested in plants, we're going to stop at the Summit Botanical Gardens, and they've got a really great education, about tropical plants. So it'll highlight a lot of the local flora that you would be seeing on your rainforest adventures in Panama. And there's my favorite animal in the whole world, the sloth. This one's a three-toed, in case you're wondering. And so Panama's biodiversity, if you think about where it's located, it's literally joining two continents. And that wasn't always the case. Those continents used to be separated, and about 3 million years ago, this land bridge formed, and suddenly animals could get from North America to South America and vice versa. So it's been a really interesting area where wildlife can mix. And there's certain animals we see in North America that we wouldn't see if that hadn't happened, and vice versa. So that's really exciting to me, just kind of being in the middle of that zone. But you'll learn all about that in your rainforest time there. There's a really beautiful national park that you'll basically spend a whole day exploring, doing some hiking in the morning and then lunch, and then they have an aerial tram and an observation tower and stuff that's in Soberania National Park. It's really
been 3 million years, the sloth hasn't made it yet.
What was that?
Since it's only been 3 million years, the sloth hasn't made it up here yet.
No. All right, so culture-wise, again, because of its position between the two continents, it's always been kind of a melting pot of diversity. The Spanish, they started building in Panama City, and that was at the time the first Spanish establishment on the Pacific coast of any of the Americas. And that was in Panama Viejo, so that was way back in the 1500s. And they built there, and that was actually destroyed. So now that's an archaeological site, which we will visit. And it was replaced by Casco Viejo, which is a really historic part from the 1600s of Panama City that you'll spend some time exploring. There's cathedrals and museums and really neat mixture of architecture, Spanish, French, early American styles. So that's got a really neat history just in Panama City itself. We're also over on the Colon side, over on the Caribbean side, going to visit a Spanish fort, Fort San Lorenzo. And that's interesting. That was built to kind of protect the treasures that were being hauled out of Peru by the Spanish. So it's got a neat connection too. If you've been to Machu Picchu, if you've been to Cusco and some places in other countries, Panama was the area where a lot of this loot was being brought by the Spanish, and then they would take off into the Caribbean and over across the Atlantic and bring stuff back to Spain. So Fort San Lorenzo has an interesting history for protecting that those goods that they were taken out of Peru. And then, aside from the major city, the Panama City and Colon, we also have some time spent with indigenous tribes. There's about 7 indigenous tribes that are still living in Panama. We're going to spend some time with the Embera tribe. And this whole experience sounds neat. I think this will be a real highlight. I know it would be for me because I like the adventure of how you get there. So you're going to get in dugout canoes and actually go up the river to get to this village. And then you'll meet the chief, you'll have food that's prepared by the village women. You'll learn kind of all about their life and how they survived here in Panama with very little changes to their culture over the years. And the food sounds good too. They're gonna have fresh fish, fried plantains, local fruit, which sounds really good to me. And I'm going to kind of end this part with the picture of the Bridge of the Americas, because I think it's a really appropriate thing to highlight, because I think Panama itself is the Bridge of the Americas. It's connecting 2 continents. It's connecting 2 oceans, basically. And this is also a very famous landmark. That you're going to see when you're on your partial transit. You'll see the Bridge of the Americas, and that connects the Pan American Highway. So it literally is connecting 2 continents, 2 worlds. And I think it'll be really exciting to see and really exciting to check out. So we're hoping to see you in Panama on our trip, like I said, hopefully in November. And is this an appropriate time to start for questions? Nice. So we hope to see you. So let's see if anybody has any questions for me about Panama, about Holbrook, about the trip itself. Oh, sorry. I did have one other slide, because I thought, well, maybe I'll save it because I'm sure people will have the question. If you don't want to ask it, I can address the elephant in the room. I did have a slide prepared for it, which was what is happening with COVID-19. And I'm sure Holbrook is not unique in this situation. We've had to kind of revise our policies about, 3 or 4 times just over the past few months. This is our current situation with COVID-19. And I will say that we have been very fortunate. This goes back to one of those earlier slides where I said we have built incredible relationships with our field partners. So we have some trips now for later in 2020 that are unfortunately eclipse viewing trips, so we can't just reschedule them. They're going to have to be canceled. But because we have these long relationships with our field partners, we're able to get most of our deposit money back and things like that. So we have had really good success rate with that. So we're trying to make our booking policies as flexible as possible. So if people are booking for a trip, we're not going to have any kind of cancellation penalties. We've extended final payment deadlines in most cases to be, instead of 3 months out, 2 months out. Give people a little bit of time because everything keeps changing, as you know. Even this trip, when we booked it for February, seemed like it was out of the danger zone, and now it's getting getting to the point where that doesn't seem like the case anymore. Again, I mentioned smaller groups. We've always operated that way, so really it's just something we're highlighting now. It's not a change in our operating procedures, and we're following up with every single one of our field partners to make sure that everybody is following the proper safety, hygiene protocols. I mean, around the world, everybody in the tourist industry is being retrained for how to deal with this and how to do social distancing and face masks and cleaning and vehicle sizes and vehicle spacing. And it's really changed every single element of how we work and operate, but that's what we're doing. and each country, you know, is going to have its own protocols too. So it's kind of whatever that country's demanding at the time. And again, it's not really a major change in our itineraries because we already kind of focus on less busy, less crowded areas, but we do tend to avoid high touristed areas, or reroute, or maybe have alternate activities if that's still a major concern at the time. But I don't want to just read it all to you. If you have a specific question, let me know, but I can leave that up.
Kevin,
Yes.
This is Rich Moore. My wife and I are both Rice alum, 78 and 80, and haven't traveled with the Rice alumni groups yet. We're more independent travelers, but so we may have some questions more about how that works. But for you, can you tell us a little bit more about Panama and the time you're going? A couple of things, you know, the weather that time of year. You know, we escaped from Houston to San Francisco partly because I don't deal with humidity and heat very well. The activity level and maybe the accommodations and travel. I assume you're flying between these three locations.
Nope.
Oh, okay.
So let me start with, well, it is going to be hot and humid. Yeah. So I can't lie about that. Its weather really does stay pretty stable year round. I know there is a rainier season, but as far as temperature goes, I'm looking to see when that is. As far as temperature goes, it's going to probably be in the low to mid 80s, and it's going to be humid. It's rainforest country, so. So that's that. So, you know, prepare for that. It doesn't change a whole lot throughout the year. Your other question, accommodation. So we're staying at the, in Panama City, we've got the Radisson, look at the name, Panama Canal. And then other than that, we don't typically stay at like the big kind of chain hotels, but those are nice ones in the big cities. When we're doing the city sightseeing. The one I'm really excited about is the Gamboa Rainforest Resort, because that's a really unique place in a really kind of peaceful, quiet setting, and you can explore the rainforest from around there. So that's that hotel. And I can always, you know, too, I can send out links or send out information if y'all want more information or to see some photos of things like that. What was your third question? There was something about...
well, just the travel between places.
So our only flights are really going to be your international flights coming in and out of Panama City before you join the trip. So we don't have any internal flights booked up. So what we're doing is we're starting in Panama City down on the south side on the Pacific. We're spending 3 nights there. Then we're getting on our partial transit up through the Panama Canal, which is going to take us about halfway through up to that big lake. Then we're getting off, and then we're taking a bus, a small, you know, coach, private coach, to the north side, to the Caribbean side in Colón. We're spending a few days there to explore that area and to see the other locks visitor center. And then from there, we go back to Gamboa, which is right in the middle. So it's kind of spaced out nicely, you know, start south, north, back to the middle, and then back. So that final leg back to the airport from Gamboa, right in the center, will be kind of the last trip before getting back to the airport and leaving. So everything's in and out of Panama City, flight-wise.
Yeah, and Shannon, one more maybe question for you. Typically, are all the participants on the trip Rice alumni and spouses or partners, or are they filled out with the general public if they don't fill, or how does that work?
Yeah, I think Kevin and I maybe could tag team this. So he was referencing that this group size will be 10 to 16, and those 10 to 16 will be all from our program. They will be either Rice alumni or friends of Rice, or they could be parents of a current Rice student. Typically, they're majority Rice alumni. But so those 10 to 16 in that small group will be there. Now, Kevin, I'm not sure on this trip, are you pairing up other small groups, or is it just our group for this
Nope,
one?
this is just our group. Yep. So the only time we do that is kind of at the beginning of the process, if we have two alumni organizations that want to work together and want to kind of share a trip just to make sure it gets filled. Sometimes we'll kind of do that on the front end, but we didn't do that for this trip. We're just it's just a Rice alumni group.
And will there be a faculty member on this one, or is this one not going to include faculty?
So as of right now, we don't have a faculty paired with this, but like Kevin mentioned in the beginning, he's hoping to push the dates to November, and it is my sincerest goal to get an engineering professor on this trip, because I think that would really kind of set it over the edge. So I'm working on that, and I think those November dates will really help. So kind of once we get those confirmed, that's the next step for me.
Yeah, that would be amazing.
Great. Yeah, we're both chemical engineering alumni, so that might be fun.
So that's what my brother did. He went to school for chemical engineering, and now he's doing more kind of bioengineering. He's working more with engineering bacteria and things like that.
Cool. Thanks.
Our time is up, friends.
Why so fast?
I know it went by incredibly fast. If you have any additional questions for Kevin, Holbrook, the Panama trip, myself, you're welcome to email travelingowls@rice.edu or reach out to Holbrook directly. Either way, we'll connect you and make sure that we get those answers for you. I'm happy that you guys decided to spend part of your day with us, and I found this very informative. So thank you so much, Kevin, for taking time out of your day to kind of explain the ins and outs of the trip. And that's it. So thank you guys so much. Have a great rest of your day. Email me if you need anything.
Hope to see ya.
Bye, y'all.